Girl, let me break this down for you real quick. LaKeitha Humphrey thought love could change a killer, thought her devotion could heal a man with murder in his past. But on February 26, 2023, that same man put a bullet in her and left her to die alone. Early that morning, 46-year-old LaKeitha vanished after what should have been a fun night out with her husband. But y'all, what looked like a simple argument turned into something that'll make your stomach turn. Just hours later, police got that call, Malcolese, you know, the one about an assault happening right there on the Edwards Avenue off-ramp from eastbound Interstate 580 in Oakland. When they pulled up to that scene, LaKeitha had been shot, but here's where it gets real twisted. Her own husband admitted he dropped her off alone on that dark, empty road after they got into it. What everybody thought was just another tragic fight gone wrong. Nah, baby. This was way more calculated than that. As investigators started digging, they uncovered something that nobody saw coming. This woman had married the same man who killed someone in her family. And now he'd killed her too, leaving her lifeless body on that cold pavement. This is the story of a woman whose trust in the wrong person cost her everything, and the dangerous pattern of violence that followed this man for decades. You're watching Shadow Crimes TV, where we bring true crime and domestic violence stories out of the shadows. Subscribe now and join us daily as we uncover the cases that demand to be heard. Don't just watch, be part of the conversation. Let me tell you about LaKeitha Humphrey McCowan. At 46, she was everything you'd want in your corner. A mother, wife, entrepreneur, the whole package. Everyone who knew this woman described her as having this beautiful soul with a smile that could light up any room. She had this way about her, you know, bringing warmth and energy wherever she stepped foot. Those closest to LaKeitha remember her not just as somebody's wife or mama, but as a woman who genuinely brought joy and laughter to people around her. She was always trying to lift folks up, always looking for ways to encourage others. Now, specific details about LaKeitha's early life, her education, her career path, those aren't talked about much publicly. But her community, they knew her as someone who was deeply invested in both her family and her hustle. This wasn't just a woman playing house. She had dreams, aspirations, goals she was working toward. If you scrolled through her social media, you'd see her sharing self-help messages all the time. That was her passion, growth and empowerment. She believed in bettering herself and helping others do the same. But here's the thing that haunted LaKeitha: she believed her worth was tied up in being a wife. Like that role defined her value as a person. LaKeitha would post these loved-up pictures with Nathaniel on social media, painting this picture of pure happiness. Her captions talked about love, devotion, the joy of being together. But if you really look close, you could catch little hints that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Some of those captions would slip through cracks, suggesting there might be struggles underneath all that public display. Comments like "love is hard but worth it," or "we fight, we grow." You know, the kind of posts that make you wonder what's really going on behind closed doors. Despite those occasional red flags, LaKeitha held on to this hope of a perfect love story. She convinced herself that their love would overcome whatever challenges they faced. Her worth seemed wrapped up in her role as his wife, and she constantly worked to maintain that image of a perfect marriage. LaKeitha dreamed of this picture-perfect life with Nathaniel. She believed love, loyalty, and dedication were the keys to making their relationship work. This dream, though, it would end up costing her everything. Now let's talk about Nathaniel McCowan. At 49, this man had a much darker past than LaKeitha chose to acknowledge. Born and raised right there in Oakland, Nathaniel came from a working-class family. His pops worked maintenance, his mama worked at a factory. They put in that work, you feel me? But Nathaniel's upbringing was shaped by something completely different. He grew up surrounded by violence, drugs, and constant chaos. While LaKeitha saw potential for change in this man, Nathaniel's troubled past was like a shadow following their relationship everywhere they went. His history of making terrible decisions and engaging in destructive behavior was the complete opposite of that idealistic love LaKeitha was desperately holding on to. By the time she met him, Nathaniel's violent history was already well established, and it was something he never truly dealt with or tried to change. Here's where this gets real heavy, y'all. Back in 1998, Nathaniel was involved in the brutal murder of his brother's mistress, Yolanda Dedman. Nathaniel and his brother Emmanuel had been caught up in this violent family situation, and when Yolanda started threatening to expose their affair through letters, Nathaniel was told to go get those letters back. That led to Yolanda's murder, and girl, it was gruesome. She was stabbed, beaten, and shot in the head. Her 4-year-old daughter was left alone in that apartment, witnessing the aftermath of what these men had done. Despite Nathaniel's then-girlfriend confessing that he'd admitted to the killing, this man somehow escaped a murder conviction. Only 11 out of 12 jurors voted guilty. Can you believe that? He got sentenced to just 7 years in prison, and even that time didn't change him one bit. When Nathaniel got released from prison, it was clear as day that he hadn't changed at all. His violent past got swept under the rug, and he was allowed to just resume his life like nothing ever happened. He came back to Oakland and started dating LaKeitha despite everything he'd done. This wasn't a reformed man trying to do better. This was someone who had manipulated his way back into society with what looked like a clean slate, helped by a legal system that failed to properly address just how dangerous he really was. By 2017, LaKeitha had stopped hiding her relationship with Nathaniel. She made it Facebook official, sharing the news that she was with a man whose violent history wasn't exactly a secret. Listen, she knew the risks, but she convinced herself that her love could be the exception to his pattern. She saw those red flags waving right in her face, but that dream of being somebody's wife seemed worth the price she might have to pay. The dream of being loved, of having a man by her side, was stronger than the reality of who he really was, deep down. But unfortunately, the man she thought she could heal, love, and change was the same man who would eventually take her life. Moving on to that tragic night, February 26, 2023, Nathaniel and LaKeitha went to a friend's birthday party in Oakland. By everyone's account, this evening was filled with tension from the jump. The couple started arguing, and honey, it was building up all night long. The argument got worse because of alcohol. You know how that goes. Soon, everything spiraled completely out of control. As they left the party, their arguing got even more heated and intense. According to what Nathaniel told police, the argument was so bad that he pulled the car over on 73rd Avenue and just let LaKeitha out. His story was that he then crashed his car somewhere on 106th Avenue near Interstate 580, walked home on foot, and had no idea what happened to his wife after that. But girl, the police investigation revealed something completely different. Wonder way darker. Nathaniel's story didn't add up at all. As investigators started putting the pieces together, it became clear that the argument didn't just end with him dropping her off somewhere safe. Instead, authorities believe Nathaniel pulled over on the side of Interstate 580 near that Edwards Avenue off-ramp. That's where he shot LaKeitha and left her to die on that freeway. A witness reported seeing a man standing over a woman, stomping on her while she laid there motionless on the ground. The scene was absolutely horrific. Like, I can't even imagine what that person witnessed that night. By 1:30 in the morning, California Highway Patrol officers responded to the scene. When they got there, they found LaKeitha dead from a gunshot wound. She'd been left in the most vulnerable place imaginable, abandoned by the very person who was supposed to protect her above anyone else. Nathaniel, despite being the last person seen with her, had the nerve to report her missing, but law enforcement immediately started suspecting his involvement. And rightfully so. Nathaniel's actions and statements were telling from the very beginning. When authorities questioned him, he denied any involvement in his wife's death, despite all the evidence that was piling up against him. But his behavior afterward, that's what really made people suspicious. His anger at being treated as a suspect seemed fake as hell. He appeared more concerned with proving his innocence than actually grieving the loss of his wife. Like, where was the devastation? Where was the heartbreak? His refusal to accept that LaKeitha's body had been found felt like he was trying to manipulate the truth and control the narrative. At this point, investigators knew they weren't dealing with just some grieving widower who'd lost his wife in a tragic accident. They began scrutinizing his every single move, continued gathering evidence, and conducted interview after interview. All the while, they were noting his strange behavior and his constant attempts to deflect suspicion away from himself. But there was no immediate breakthrough in the case. And for nearly 2 years, 2 whole years, Nathaniel walked around, free, seemingly unaffected by the horrific death he had caused. Can you imagine? This man was out here living his life while LaKeitha's family was grieving and demanding answers. The investigation into LaKeitha's death lasted almost 2 years, despite Nathaniel's initial denials and his claims that he didn't know anything. Authorities kept pressing forward. As they continued putting evidence together, it became more and more clear that Nathaniel had been the one who killed her. As investigators dug deeper into his background, they learned about his violent past and discovered this shocking pattern of behavior. This wasn't just some spontaneous act of anger or a moment where he snapped. This was the result of years and years of unresolved violence that he'd carried into his relationship with LaKeitha. But for a minute there, he probably thought he'd gotten away with it. He probably thought he was smarter than everybody else and that his story would hold up under scrutiny. On January 2nd, 2025, Nathaniel was finally arrested at the Sky River Casino in Elk Grove, California, after a warrant for his arrest was issued. The arrest marked the beginning of what LaKeitha's family hoped would be real justice. He was taken into custody without any incident and booked at the Santa Rita Jail in Alameda County. Nathaniel was held without bond, facing serious charges including murder, corporal injury to a partner, and possession of a firearm by a felon. Those charges reflected just how severe his actions were and the ongoing danger this man posed to society as a whole. Let me tell you something. Nathaniel McCowan's criminal history had been like a shadow hanging over his life for decades. In addition to his previous conviction for voluntary manslaughter connected to the brutal death of his brother's mistress, this man's record was full of violent outbursts, substance abuse issues, and a family history that was just riddled with criminal behavior. His violent tendencies had been documented over and over again, and his behavior followed a pattern that law enforcement had never been able to address effectively. That previous conviction in the 1998 murder case, where he only served 7 years, had basically set the stage for what would later happen to LaKeitha. The special allegations in his current case made him ineligible for probation and subject to California's 2 strikes law. This meant that if convicted, Nathaniel could face a sentence of up to 56 years to life in prison with no chance of parole. LaKeitha's family, friends, and community were hoping for a swift trial and a verdict that would ensure Nathaniel was finally held accountable for all the pain and suffering he had caused over the years. The loss of LaKeitha Humphrey McCowan was felt deep throughout her family, friends, and the entire community. Her death wasn't just tragic, Nathaniel, it was preventable, and the ongoing investigation raised some painful questions about how our society continues to fail women like her. But here's what really gets me: the public's inability to fully understand just how serious his past crimes were only allowed this man to continue his dangerous behavior. The system failed LaKeitha long before that night on the freeway. Despite all the years of trauma and chaos in her marriage, LaKeitha had never been able to escape Nathaniel's grip. Her community, absolutely devastated by this loss, came together to mourn and to demand justice. Vigils and public memorials paid tribute to LaKeitha's life, highlighting her warm and compassionate nature that everyone remembered. Her family and friends were now faced with the heartbreaking task of healing from the brutal loss of a woman they knew was full of potential and light.
We have had enough! We have had enough!
Her death wasn't just a loss to her immediate family, it was a loss to every single person who had been touched by her presence and her spirit. In Oakland, a city that's already struggling with violence and rising domestic abuse cases, LaKeitha's murder serves as this stark reminder of the dangers so many women face. It happens when love gets confused with sacrifice, when loyalty becomes blind, and when those red flags get ignored over and over again. Let me keep it real with y'all. Alcohol played a major role in the night LaKeitha died. It was clear that the argument between the couple had been made worse by drinking, which probably messed with Nathaniel's judgment and led to the violence escalating the way it did. Nathaniel's prior criminal history, including his previous involvement in drug dealing and violent behavior, raised serious questions about whether substance abuse contributed to his actions that night. There were also signs that his anger management issues had gotten worse over the years, fueled by both substance abuse and the deep-seated resentment from his past crimes. This combination of factors created a toxic situation that ultimately cost LaKeitha her life. Her friends and family later remembered that she had always been supportive of Nathaniel despite his violent history. But those who knew her best could see that the cracks in their relationship were getting wider, and the early warning signs of abuse had been ignored or downplayed by everyone around them. The tragic murder of LaKeitha Humphrey McCowan isn't just a personal loss for her family and community. It's a harsh reminder of the systemic failures that often allow dangerous individuals like Nathaniel to slip through the cracks of our justice system. Nathaniel's violent past, including his role in murdering his brother's mistress, should have been a massive red flag long before LaKeitha ever got involved with him. But unfortunately, his past was either overlooked or downplayed by people who should have known better and done more to protect women in the community. One of the most heartbreaking parts of LaKeitha's story is how her own desire to love and heal Nathaniel blinded her to the clear and present danger he posed to her life. Like so many women in abusive relationships, LaKeitha believed that love, faith, and patience could transform her partner into someone different. She overlooked his violent history, dismissing it as something in the past that he had moved beyond and grown from. This isn't an uncommon experience, especially for women who are taught to prioritize their relationships and their partner's well-being over their own safety and peace of mind. LaKeitha's tragic end forces us to pay attention to how this mentality can sometimes lead to absolutely disastrous consequences. We have to do better as a community in recognizing and addressing these patterns before more women lose their lives. LaKeitha's family and community are now left dealing with the emotional scars of her death. While they found some comfort in Nathaniel's eventual arrest and the hope that justice will finally be served, the pain of losing LaKeitha McCowan, a mother, a friend, a sister, is something that can never be measured or fully healed. She was a woman with a promising future, full of potential, and her life was cut short because she chose to ignore the red flags and believe in the possibility of change in a man with a documented violent history. But hey, let's not put all the blame on LaKeitha for trusting the wrong person. We as a society failed her too. We failed to keep dangerous men like Nathaniel accountable for their actions, and we failed to create systems that truly protect women from domestic violence. What's one thing this case taught you that you didn't know before? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a real conversation about how we can do better. Thanks for watching Shadowed Crimes TV. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We bring you true crime stories daily, Leita cases you know and ones you don't. Stay with us as we shine a light on shadowed stories that need to be heard, because every victim deserves to have their story told.